What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Jordan Kurtz with comments from the Peanut Gallery as well as the MMA plug powered by Denver Sports Betting as well as Mile High Sports. So just wanted to take a quick peek into the MMA world over the weekend. Of course, we had the debut of the much anticipated UFC Fight Island. There were some tremendous fights all throughout the night. There were also a couple that left a little bit more to be desired and some that were just straight up weird. In general, there's been a lot of crazy, kind of peculiar things going on out there in the world. I mean, first and foremost, if we take a look at the Wayfair Scandal, just to get this out of the way, I don't know how many of you are up to the current events that are going on right now, but the scandal that somewhat broke over the weekend, apparently it's been something that, according to those on the interwebs, have said has been going on for quite some time. I just happened to become aware of it over the weekend, but Wayfair, a popular online merchant site, has been alleged of human trafficking and selling people essentially within broad daylight. That if you were to, there's some pretty crazy coincidences if you go down the rabbit hole of, if you type in the name of a particular missing person within the search bar on Wayfair, you were then able to see, a storage cabinet within dimensions, similar to them from what I understood, and they were at absurd prices. Say for example, a $50 storage cabinet was then being displayed for $12,000, just as one single example. I don't know if this has been something that is a widespread thing among with other online merchants or sites that offer third-party selling. That's what I believe the official statement from Wayfair was that they don't control all of the third-party vendors that happen to be merchants through their site. However, it's just extremely odd. There were some very unsettling things and disturbing coincidences that were a part of this whole Wayfair thing that was brought to my attention. Especially when there's thousands of people that are still going missing from these ICE facilities all the time. It's unreal, some of the things that are going on out there. Moving along, as far as the NFL goes, it is some groundbreaking news that the Washington football team will no longer be associating their nickname with the name that has been associated with the franchise for it's close to 80 years now, almost damn near since the inception of the NFL. They've got only a couple of weeks before teams all officially report for training camp and start to get the ball rolling as far as getting ready for this season. If there is a season, who knows how all of this coronavirus stuff is going to shake up, as the time continues. Seems like it's a complete donk show here in the U.S. compared to the rest of the world. But we have to address this for what it is. Dan Snyder did not make this change because he feels any bit morally or socially obligated to, or because he feels like this is the right thing. No, that's not the situation. The only reason why this dude is changing the name is because the major sponsors and the people who put money in his pocket were starting to say, if you do not make a change, we will not back you. The two big people that put this ball in motion, or corporations, I should say, are FedEx and Nike. FedEx being the corporation that holds the naming rights and sponsorship for the Washington football stadium, as well as Nike, obviously being the official apparel and merchandiser for the NFL. Now, if you lose that sponsorship due to something of this nature for your actual stadium, you're up a creek right now at this point. That is a lot of money, billions, and billions of dollars in the long run that we're talking about as far as the relationship between the Washington Football Organization and FedEx. When we're talking about the Nike relationship, Nike is who produces and who sells all the NFL apparel and merchandise. If you no longer have all of those hundreds of millions generated in terms of revenue, if not more, I mean, I'm not even completely aware of what the figures are. It could be into the billions. I don't know what the merchandise sales looks like for a franchise like the Washington Football Club. But if you do not have Nike pushing your product or selling your organization's material, then you are severely taking money out of, or taking cash flow out of the equation for your franchise. So that is the reason why Snyder decided to make the change. Don't go thinking that it's because he's had some moment of clarity or that he believes that this is any bit the right thing. In fact, he has been quoted as far as saying that he will never change the franchise name. It took something as big as these corporations threatening to empty his pockets in order to make this happen. Saying that one last time. Moving along to Fight Island. Fight Island was a great showing overall. Like I say, there were a couple of fights on the card that made you just kind of scratch your head and, leave a little bit more to be desired. Like I believe the Dos Santos fight, it was just dick kick after dick kick. It was stoppage for just craziness. Starting off the show, there was fireworks right away. Martin, the Spartan Day, he had an incredible first couple of rounds against Davy Grant, and then eventually, that's the fight game. Just happened to get clipped. That's, like I said, that's the way that it goes within this business. Some of the fights that stood out, not a lot of on the prelims really kind of popped, if you will. Raulian Paiva, he did show some promise. He's got a crazy build for that flyweight division. He's built very similar to Brandon Royval, a long, lanky flyweight that could very well be a potential matchup for each of those guys at some point here in the near future. But the rest of the prelims, really the next one that made a lasting impression for me was the Yuri and the Ozdemir fight. Yuri has a crazy style. He's kind of, all over the place, and then eventually was able to, make it nighttime for no time. And the way that Ozdemir went down, that's crazy. I don't know that I've seen him get, and maybe it's just because of the recency bias, but I don't remember ever seeing him get completely sparked and just unconscious that way. Like I say, I'm probably forgetting something that I've seen or closely mimicked that, but just not coming to mind right now. Then we start moving along to the main card. Paige Van Zant started off, I'll be the first one to admit I got this one wrong. I thought that she was going to potentially pull off the upset. She had a lot riding on this fight. She was very, very clear about wanting to go into free agency and test what her worth was on the free market. That worth definitely is not, or those leverage points for the negotiations are nowhere near what they would have been had she won. Plain and simple. If you're coming off of a win, and then that would have been, a couple wins put together in a row. Obviously, you have a lot more leverage when you get your hand raised. But two, as vocal as she was about it and talking about her worth, she got her ass whooped. There's no way. I could try to sugarcoat it all we want, but at the end of the day, you could polish a turd all you want, still shit. She lost very early in that fight. She was submitted just so technically by Amanda Ribas, and Ribas, I think, really kind of stole a lot of that luster in the moment, because she was so organically authentic within her post-fight interviews, just super bubbly, very smiley, laughy, was very just jovial about the entire situation. I'm very excited to see what she does coming next, because I had set up to that point, all she had really to me that was an impressive victory was Mackenzie Dern. Being that her one loss was to Polyana Viana, I thought, we've got to see a couple more things before we really start to crown Ibas as one of those next coming prospects that is just teetering the line of chipping into the contender conversation. But she was a savage. She's a lifelong martial artist who I think is really starting to come into her own, and she has earned my respect in that regard, to consider her as one of those top tier athletes that is not far off from earning a title shot. In the next fight, we have Rose Namajunas against Jessica Andrade in a rematch. So it's been a little while since we've gotten to see Rose in the octagon. However, man, Rose looks so incredible, especially those first couple of rounds. It's beautiful to watch Rose fight. The way that she moves, it's poetic. I don't know that there is anyone who just flows so well. I don't even know what the right word to describe what Rose does when she's in her own little flow state, but it's something that is beautiful to see when Rose is on. Rose, in my opinion, dominated those first two rounds of that fight. And yes, Andrade did kind of start to come on a little bit at the end of the second and had a solid third round. But in my opinion, Rose did way too much in those first couple of rounds to where that fight was even in question. Yeah, call it 29-28. That's fine. Give the third round to Andrade. But those first two rounds were so much in Rose's favor that, to me, it was not close. If we look at the next fight, we have some controversy. There's always going to be some of those questions in relation to, was this stopped too soon? Did it go on long enough? Especially when it's in world title fights. Was the guy given his opportunity? Was his opportunity taken away? So on and so forth. We can go down the rabbit hole of asking all of those questions. However, I do believe that Jose Aldo was put in a bad position. One, Aldo, I believe, looked good throughout the fight for the most part. He did get hurt and face adversity a couple of times, but he also looked well and was able to mount his own offense against Jan at certain points throughout the fight. But at the end, when he was down wearing unanswered shots for well over 3 minutes. When he finally was dropped, he went over. He was in the turtle position. He had his hands over his head. Did he roll maybe once or twice? Sure, but he wasn't doing anything to advance his position. Now, people then question, oh, well, should that have been the corner? To me, no, that's not the corner's job. That is on the referee. That is what the referee gets paid to do. If you were in the corner, you were behind your guy until the very last breath. You guys are trying to go to war and bring home a world championship in that situation. So let's nip that one in the bud right away. That is on the referee. It's tough. It's tough because Aldo got his shot. There's no way that he can make the argument, as per like say a Dominic Cruz, that he was not given his opportunity to really kind of see that thing all the way through the end. But we're talking two completely different situations here. Dominic Cruz was still in the process of getting up, had only worn a couple of shots. Jose Aldo was wearing minutes worth of unanswered shots. I mean, at times eating entire combos, and this contest was not stopped. But I will say that for anyone to still completely write Aldo off, I think you're wrong in that. I think that there's a strong case to be made that it was 2-2 going into that final round. I know that a lot of people saw it as potentially 3-1 in Jan's favor, but I will say that from the crowd that I was watching the fight with, that there were people that had saw the fight going into the final round that potentially all Aldo had to do was survive it, because they had saw him taking 3 up to that point. One of those close fights, but ultimately in the end, you saw Jan be able to prevail. Aldo is still in his young 30s, but he has a lot of miles on the tires. He's in his young 30s, but essentially by MMA years, he's mid 40s at this point. Let's call it for what it is. If we're saying that he was still the champion back in the WEC days, and when that first came into the UFC, we're saying that he was facing the best in the world from the time that he was in his young 20s and was very active for a long time. Ran into a couple of years where there were some injuries that saw him away, but aside from that, Aldo fought a lot within that time frame, especially within his title run. I don't know what's next for him. That now is back-to-back losses. A fight against Dominic Cruz actually, to me, would be a fun matchup to see at some point. Corey Sandhagen is also coming off of a loss. Maybe that's a matchup that the matchmakers look at. But I don't know. I would love to see the legend versus legend. The former WEC champion of 35s and the 45s going at it. You build up that entire storyline, legends, blah blah blah. The co-main event, it's tough to use the word robbery because the word robbery at times gets overplayed and it devalues the potency of the word for when there are true situations of a robbery. I had Max Holloway winning that fight. I thought that he clearly won 3 rounds to 2. The potential of a 4th round in the mix for Max. But that's not how the judges saw it. And the fact that there were 2 judges that kind of interchanged in, which rounds that they saw Max winning. There was one that, that didn't have him winning the 3rd, but gave him the 5th, and vice versa. The judging just is still always going to be a little bit inconsistent, just based off of the way that the rule set is, the 10-point must system. There leaves a lot of shit that can get fucked up. Let's just call it for what it is. Big John McCarthy on the Weighing In podcast that he hosts along with Josh Thompson, he was on record stating that, hey, I wrote the rules for this scoring system, and these guys did not follow that, or judges in general selectively follow the rule set. So I don't know what the answer is to this. All I do know is that continually we always have questions with the judging and with scoring, but until we experiment with any other sort of formats or criteria, we are never going to know what is ultimately the right way to go about it. As far as the actual fight and the contest goes, Max Holloway came out looking great, in my opinion. He added a lot more kicks into the equation, and for just being Zoom classes for training, Max looked good. He did maybe fade a little bit in terms of his cardio and his endurance toward the latter half of the 4th round and at points in the 5th. However, I still think that Max looked good. Volk made some adjustments later on in the fight, but again, I don't think that those adjustments were enough to give him the fight. We're talking that Max dropped him twice, clean knockdowns, which for whatever reason, one of them was not scored as such in the first 2 rounds. How you can definitively watch that fight and say that Alexander Volkanovski won that fight is absurd to me. I'm sorry. I want all the smoke on that one, because there's no way that you can convince me that Volkanovski won the fight. No way. In the main event, moving along, it was more competitive in some ways than I anticipated between Jorge Gamebred Masvidal and Kamaru Usman, and then there were some ways where maybe not so much. I will say this, that Anybody who walks away from that fight saying that Jorge does not have solid grappling or can't wrestle, you're out of your fucking mind. If you weren't already convinced that he can wrestle at this point. We're talking Kamaru, who is one of the most elite wrestlers in all of MMA, and at times he had issue being able to take Jorge down and also keep him down. Was he able to use body locks to keep him pressed up against the cage in many of occasions? Sure, absolutely. And were there possibly opportunities that Jorge throughout the fight could have done a little bit more inside of those clinches to circle out and generate some space and get away? That's also correct. One thing that is not being addressed with those claims from those making them, though, is that just plain as if you look at the endurance factor, Jorge took the fight off of 6 days' notice. So granted, yes, even though he had been training, he wasn't exactly coming off of the couch. He's still not in fight shape, and especially in world title fight shape, in which you're looking to be able to go 25 minutes at the highest level. Kamaru was in peak condition. So if you're Jorge, when you're talking about trying to free yourself and get your back off of the fence, and even in the in those scrambles and those takedown sequences where he was able to get himself up right away, that takes a lot of energy, a lot of energy. And so if you're Jorge, you're someone like Jorge who you've got to have the mindset, or you're most likely having the mindset of when you come into this fight that, hey, I'm trying to put him out in one. Anything after the first, I've got to pick and choose my sprints and my my times where I really surge forward, because I don't have a full tank of gas. I've got to be selective and pick my shots. After the first round, after you've tried to take his head off and you didn't get there, then when Kamaru, he sees you put your hands over your head and you take a big deep belly breath, then you think, okay, I can wrestle and win. I don't have to get in a firefight, because at the end of the day, Jorge's still a dog and he will still let them things pop. If you're Kamaru and you can say, all right, well, I'm just going to use my wrestling. I will control position, posture, where the fight is taking place, whether or not we're up against the fence or whether I'm down and smothering you like a wet blanket. Those are all things that Kamaru had to have been weighing. Why take the unnecessary risk? As a champion, at the end of the day, it's not whether or not you're the most entertaining yet. We would love to see entertaining fights, but your number one job, once you have that belt around your waist, is to win. And Kamaru did what he needed to do to win. Yes, is it the quote unquote, by casual fan standards, boring style? Sure, go ahead, have that one. That is something that you can possibly attribute it to. It's not going to be something that's a sexy style that will draw in a ton of fans. No, it's not. But is it effective? Absolutely. Is it a valid style? Yes. Being wrestle fucked is a reality in a fight, plain and simple. If you want to watch something that's just striking and point fighting in that regard, go watch Muay Thai, go watch Letweight, go watch Glory Kickboxing. There are martial arts disciplines that are solely striking if that is something that you want. But you are watching MMA, which includes jiu-jitsu and wrestling and every other grappling discipline that is brought into the equation. Judo, your principles of other different martial arts that are out there. Those are all factors within this sport. If you don't like that being in the equation, there are sports out there available for you to watch and to view that do not include these. In MMA, you have arguably the greatest mixed martial arts of all time that has a similar style. Georges St-Pierre is widely accredited by most people out there as the greatest of all time. Yeah, there's going to be your few others that get thrown in the mix, in terms of, who you believe is. But consistent person in every single list is going to be George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre fought to win. He didn't fight to entertain, especially after the Matt Serra upset. George St. Pierre played the safe game and won. He flat out freaking won. That is what Kamaru did. Will we see a rematch? Almost certainly. Will it be right away? Most likely not. I think that we will see Gilbert Burns slot in for the next rematch. I haven't seen or for the next match for the title, I should say, to rekindle the canceled bout due to Gilbert Burns and his corner tested positive for COVID. If I'm a Jorge, I'm selective about who I take next. In my eyes, there's really only the Colby fight if it's not sitting out and waiting for another rematch. I know people are going to throw the Leon Edwards fight out there, but I get it. Leon Edwards is on a huge win streak and he's chipping on the door of a title shot, but he hasn't fought in so long, and I don't know. I'm not sold on Leon Edwards. His resume is there. It's solid. But I'm not sold on the thought that Leon Edwards is in the same conversation of fighter as Jorge Masvidal, Kamaru Usman, Gilbert Burns, and Colby Covington. I'm just not sold on that right now. And maybe it's just because I haven't seen enough from Leon in the recent history. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer for that one is. We are already going to have a new card coming up within the next couple of days. It's going to be a Wednesday night show from Fight Island. So it'll be cool to see something in the middle of the week, especially because there's still no other live sports that are going on. We'll have the interesting dynamic for the event with Paul Felder. He was originally unable to go just based off of coming into contact with someone who had COVID exposure. However, he's all passed, cleared all of his tests, has gone through the quarantine protocols and procedures. But Jared Flash Gordon is over there to fight, and Jared has no corner there. Jared's corner was unable to participate due to COVID concerns. And so in the middle of the broadcast, Paul Felder will transition from commentator to cornerman. It has been reported that he will be in full suit working the corner of Jared Gordon. I think that's safe to say. We have never seen that before in the UFC. Who do you guys have? Who are your big locks for this particular card on Wednesday night? Let us know in the comments. Check us out, the MMAplug.com. Check us out, the MMA Plug 303 on Instagram, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram. Give us a follow. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. We will be doing more live chats with you as time goes along. Thank you very much for following along.